Okay, everyone. Hi, welcome to our webinar of what's happening with DACA. My name is Guadalupe Jasso with Buen Vecino. I want to just start off by saying thank you to everyone that's been here with us and for just kind of being here. We've been having some difficulties, so there was a bit of a delay, but thank you so much for still hanging on and being here. Right before I get to the introduction of this webinar, I do want to go ahead and pass this over to our interpreters just for some guidelines so that we understand how to proceed for the webinar, as we will be having live interpretation for English and Spanish. And then shortly after, I'll come back and we'll begin with those introductions. Thank you so much.
This message will be repeated in English. Buenas noches, mi nombre es María Elena y seré una de las intérpretes el día de hoy junto con mi colega Javi.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Javi. I will be one of the interpreters today with my colleague, María Elena.
Las organizaciones que hicieron este evento posible están comprometidas a las prácticas conscientes de la justicia del lenguaje, donde todas las personas pueden participar en el idioma que prefieran. Así es que les recomendamos que este panel sea interpretado en inglés y español.
The organizations hosting this event are committed to intentional language justice practices and the creation of spaces where all people can communicate in the language they prefer. So we remind you that this panel we interpreted into English and Spanish.
Antes de guiarles a acceder a la función de interpretación, queremos repasar algunas pautas de justicia del lenguaje.
Before walking you through accessing the interpretation feature, we want to go over a few language justice guidelines.
Les pedimos a todos que hablen a un paso moderado. Si necesitamos que hablen más despacio, haremos esta seña en la cámara, compartiremos estos símbolos en el chat o el anfitrión le interrumperá gentilmente para recordarle que hable más despacio.
Please speak at a moderate pace. If we need you to slow down, we will make this sign on camera. Share these symbols in the chat, or the host may kindly interrupt you to slow down.
Si mencionan términos complejos o siglas, les pedimos que por favor las deletreen o expliquen.
If you do mention complex terms and acronyms, please spell them out or explain them.
Tomen pausas y respiran al hablar. Esto nos dará tiempo para capturar y terminar de interpretar lo que se ha dicho.
Take pauses and breaths while speaking. This will give us time to capture and render everything being shared.
Un recordatorio de que estaremos utilizando el lenguaje inclusivo en este espacio, así que notarán que usaremos E y X al final de las palabras que se refieren a personas. Esto no es un error, sino una práctica consciente para incluir géneros no binarios. La justicia del lenguaje también incluye la justicia de género.
A reminder that we will be using inclusive language in Spanish, so you will notice that we'll use E or X at the end of words referring to people. This is not a mistake. It is an intentional practice to include non-binary genders. Language justice also includes gender justice.
Ahora, ¿cómo acceder a la función de interpretación?
Now, how to access the interpretation feature.
La función de interpretación ya está activada. Para acceder, haga clic en el globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de la ventana de Zoom. Si está en su teléfono, va a haber 3 puntos en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Haga clic ahí, haga clic en la interpretación de idiomas y seleccione el idioma que habla. Si usted no es bilingüe en inglés y español, debe escoger un canal de idioma.
As you can see, the interpretation feature is already activated. To access it, click on the globe at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you're connected from a mobile or device or your phone, you will see a 3-dot menu at the bottom right corner of your screen. Click on these and select the language you speak. If you're not bilingual in both English and Spanish, you must select a language channel.
Gracias. Le pasamos la palabra al anfitrión y ahora podemos comenzar a usar la función de interpretación.
Thank you. We will now pass it over to the host and we may now begin using the interpretation feature.
Hi, everyone. So, as mentioned before,
Hola a todos, como les dije
my name is
anteriormente.
Guadalupe
Mi
Jasso,
nombre es Guadalupe Jasso.
and I am a community organizer with Buen Vecino. And our organization is a grassroots organization in Ventura County, California. Our vision is to cultivate an environment where the human dignity of every person is respected and where all people have equal rights. So our co-hosts for today, we have Immigrant Legal Resource Center and Chilfasa, the Chicano, Chicana, Latino, Latina Faculty Staff Association at California State University, Channel Islands. So the mission of the Immigrant Legal Resource Center is to work with and educate immigrants, community organizations, and the legal sector to continue to build a democratic society that values diversity and the rights of all people. Chilfasa serves as a support network to build community and mentorship and provide culturally relevant events and programs for faculty, staff, and students at CSUCI Channel Islands. We organize this event today in holiday season and at a time when most universities are closed for winter break. In response to requests for community members who want to know what's happening with DACA and how we can support dreamers. So because this issue is so timely as US Congress approaches the end of its session, we are here to provide updates on DACA, the efforts to achieve permanent legislative solutions, and discuss long-term strategy for DACA recipients. We are also here to build solidarity as we move forward through the ongoing realities in our society with resourcefulness, resilience, strong bonds, and ethnic of caring for each other, and with the vision to see beyond the obstacles of the moment and embrace the scope of possibilities for the future, as immigrants have always done. So DACA is only a small part of the larger unresolved issues of immigration. We are also here to encourage and mobilize supporters to take action and raise their voices to make a change. So we will be having a recording of tonight's event, and we plan to post the English and Spanish recordings online. So after we hear from our panel, we will respond to questions that you can type into our Q&A box. When you enter a question, you can choose whether to be anonymous or you can allow us to see your name and it will be shown. So first and foremost, I would like to present our two presenters. Our first presenter will be Veronica and Krsna Avila. Just a brief overview of who our presenters are. So Veronica Garcia is a staff attorney with the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. She joined the ILRC in December 2017 as a San Joaquin Valley Law Fellow. Prior to joining ILRC, Veronica completed an Equal Justice Works Fellowship at Centro Legal de la Raza as a DACA Immersion Fellow. Veronica is a graduate of Howard University School of Law. During law school, Veronica interned at various immigrant rights organizations, including Kids in Need of Defense and New York Legal Aid. Additionally, Veronica was recognized by the Hispanic Bar Association of Washington, D.C., HBA DC, for her commitment to the advancement of the Hispanic community by being awarded the inaugural HBA DC Foundation Scholarship. As an immigrant who grew up in Oakland, California, Veronica strives to use her legal education and experience working directly with immigrant communities. And we have also Krsna Avila, also serves as a staff attorney with Immigrant Legal Resource Center. Based in San Francisco, Krsna focuses on immigration enforcement issues, including state and local law enforcement's cooperation with federal immigration agencies in unlawfully deporting immigrants, and deferred action for childhood arrivals advocacy. Having immigrated to the United States with his parents when he was only 4 months old, Krsna grew up as an undocumented immigrant. Prior to law school, Krsna worked with the ILRC to establish a legal services program at Educators for Fair Consideration, provided legal support to undocumented youth throughout the county. While in law school, Krsna worked at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Washington, D.C., and the American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California. Krsna earned his undergraduate degree from the University of California, Davis, and his law degree from Cornell Law School, where he received the 2017 Freeman Award for Civil Human Rights for his commitment to civil rights and public service. So I will be passing it on to our amazing attorneys for their presentation.
Thank you so much. So bear with me a second while I share my screen. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are going to spend the first portion of this a webinar tonight discussing what is happening with DACA at this moment. There have been a lot of changes and a lot of information that's given to the community and not given to the community, right, around DACA litigation and rules. And we just want to make sure that everybody who has DACA or works with someone who has DACA is able to have the right information and also know what kind of steps or what kind of strategies are happening around DACA as we wait for a decision on what will happen to DACA in the future. So I'm going to start us off by getting us all on the same page and discussing what the current status of DACA is. As of now, right, we have seen changes on who could access DACA since about 2017, right, when we first saw the original termination of DACA or the attempt of DACA being terminated by the Trump administration. Then DACA came back because of advocacy and work from the community and DACA recipients. We had a lawsuit that made it up to the Supreme Court, and DACA was upheld and continued, right? Then after that, we saw an announcement of a different memo, that who could access DACA, how long someone could access DACA. Then DACA was reopened, and then now DACA isn't reopened. So we want to start with what's happening, who could access DACA right now, and who cannot access DACA right now. So deferred action for childhood arrivals right now at this moment is currently open to those individuals who had DACA, who have DACA now or had DACA in their past, but their DACA has not been expired for more than 1 year, right? So right now, currently as it is, because of a litigation that Krsna is going to talk about more in a bit, USCIS, the agency that processes DACA, is accepting, processing, and granting renewals from individuals who currently have DACA right now. So that means that you have an active, valid work authorization and have been granted deferred action by USCIS for a period of 2 years, right? If you are currently in that state, you are able to access DACA right now, submit your DACA for renewal and get that processed and reviewed by USCIS, and they will give you a decision on your case. You could also submit a renewal for DACA if you have DACA right now and your DACA expired less than a year ago. What does that mean, right? It means that if I have DACA right now and my work permit and my DACA expired, let's say December 25th of 2020, right? And I am looking to renew, that means that I could renew now because my DACA has been expired less than 1 year, right? Those are the two groups of individuals who could right now submit their DACA renewals and get those processed and accepted by USCIS and get a decision on their case, right? That's really important because there is a group of people who USCIS is accepting DACA applications, but will not give a decision on their case. So for DACA renewals, those who currently have DACA and those whose DACA expired less than 1 year, they are able to submit, right, and get a decision on their case from USCIS. When should these individuals renew, right? There is a lot of uncertainty in the future of DACA, whether, how long it will be available, whether things will change on who could access DACA in the future. So there are a lot of questions on when someone should move forward and renew their DACA, right? We saw that back in 2020, right, when we were waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court and that litigation move up around how DACA was terminated. A lot of individuals were renewing as soon as possible, right, because they wanted to get the most out of their DACA grants that they could before a decision came from those cases. Right now, we are encouraging people to renew their DACA if it expires 6 months from now, right, those individuals, to renew as soon as possible. Right, and we're encouraging that because we want to make sure that people are able to submit their DACA renewals and get their DACA renewals approved by USCIS before there's a lapse of time in their DACA grant, right? Because if you don't get an approval, right, before your current DACA expires, that means that you also won't have a valid work permit and won't have deferred action for those months until you get a decision from USCIS, until you get a grant. A new time period of DACA. For those individuals whose DACA expires more than 6 months from now, the best thing someone could do is go and speak with a legal service provider who could help them decide whether it's a good decision to move forward or whether they should wait. Generally speaking, I think for individuals whose DACA expires 6 months to a year from now, those individuals could definitely do pro and con and decide whether it's a good idea to move forward and apply now or whether they should wait, right? Because when you move forward and apply, you have to pay the $495 and USCIS will grant you your new DACA period from the day that it approves it, not from the day that your current DACA expires, right? So if you get renewed 2 months in advance, 3 months in advance, that will cut down your new DACA will cut down your new DACA by those 3 months or 2 months, right? So, you know, if it's a lot of time you're gaining from that, right, from 6 months to a year, it might be worth it to move forward and renew now, even if you would lose 5 months, right? For those individuals whose DACA doesn't expire for more than a year from now, right? Let's say that you recently renewed, you might still have 1.5 years, right, on your current DACA period. For those, maybe it's not worth it to renew right now because the time that you will gain by renewing will not be significant enough to justify, let's say, paying $495, right? So it's definitely a decision, you know, to make, to speak to a legal service provider to see if it would benefit your case or maybe not benefit your case. Also, there's certain agencies in California who had DACA renewal fee coverage that might still have it in the new year that you might want to go and seek to see if they're able to cover the filing fee, because that could also help in the decision that you make as to whether you want to, you know, renew now or you want to wait a bit. So what about those DACA renewals that expired over a year from today, right? So if you are one of those recipients or you know of a recipient who had DACA, but maybe they couldn't renew because they needed to resolve some issues in their case, or maybe they couldn't renew because they didn't have the filing fee, right? And now their DACA has been expired for over a year. Unfortunately, those cases are being treated as initials. And because of the litigation that Krsna will discuss in a bit, those initials are not being approved at the moment by USCIS, right? So someone could submit their DACA renewal that expired over a year and USCIS will accept it. They'll take the filing fee of $495, but they will not issue a decision on that case until the litigation gets concluded, gets resolved, right? So those cases will be held by USCIS and it might be months, right? It might be another year before you get a decision. And depending on what happens in that litigation, it could mean that you either are able to get reviewed and approved, or it could mean that, you know, possibly DACA will not exist in the future and that, you know, renewal will not be processed. Potentially you could lose the filing fee. So it's definitely a discussion to have with the legal service provider who might know the specific facts of your case, right? Because it's going to depend on those facts, whether you decide to maybe take the risk and submit that renewal, or maybe wait until you have a decision on the case, right? And it'll depend on what those specific facts are of your case before you move forward. What about DACA initials, right? So there was a short period of time in the last year where DACA initials were being accepted and processed by USCIS, but because of this litigation, they're not being processed at this moment. Once again, this group of individuals, DACA initials, those are individuals who have never had DACA, right? Maybe they were not 16 at the time when it was terminated in 2017. And DACA initials had not been open for a while and they finally were open and people were finally eligible. Those individuals, you know, who are now eligible for DACA, you know, USCIS is processing, or sorry, is accepting those applications, right? The question becomes whether you should submit or not. There are some people who are choosing to move forward and submit, right? But it's important to know that those are not being processed right now by USCIS, meaning they're not going to get a decision on those cases until the litigation is concluded, right? Until there's a final decision on that as to whether USCIS is allowed to continue to process those DACA initials, right? So at the moment, if you choose to move forward, you could submit it pay the filing fee. You will get a receipt saying that they've accepted it, but you will not get a decision for maybe months or a year, depending on how long the litigation takes. Some people are submitting them because they feel that there's a benefit in having the application in the pipeline, right? So if DACA does reopen in the future, right, for initial applicants, even if it's for a short period of time, they feel that maybe those will be processed sooner, right? But it's important to note that, you know, if they are not allowed to be processed, right, and they're not allowed to be approved, and the risk that DACA ends in the future, do note that USCIS will now have your information, right? So the government will now have your information. And if DACA closes, right, there won't be a benefit obtained, and you could lose the filing fee that you submitted, right? Hopefully not, but if, you know, that is a risk that you would have to take. So definitely for these cases, I would say more than the other two, right? For these cases, for someone who's never submitted an application to USCIS, has never come forward to ask for an immigration benefit, it's important more than ever, right, for these individuals to discuss the facts of their case with a trusted immigration attorney or DOJ representative to see if there are any red flags in their case, anything that they should consider or take into consideration before they move forward in submitting their applications. Also, just quickly wanted to talk a little bit about advanced parole. So like I mentioned in the beginning, right, DACA is open right now for individuals who have DACA currently or had DACA that expired less than a year ago. Those people could move forward and renew. Those individuals could also move forward and apply for advanced parole. So individuals who currently have DACA could apply for advanced parole, which is a travel document that allows them to exit the United States and re-enter the United States while they have a valid period of advanced parole, right? For DACA recipients, you're eligible to apply and request advanced parole if you could show the government that your reason of travel falls under one of these categories, right? That your reason of travel has to do either with employment, with an employment reason, with a humanitarian reason, or with an educational reason, right? So that means that if you are interested in traveling, right, and you right now work for a company that has a conference abroad, and they would like you to attend this conference, that is a reason that you could use to submit a request for advanced parole and ask to travel under the employment reason by submitting information about that conference that you want to go to, right? This could also work if your employer wants to send you to a meeting abroad, right? There's a meeting with maybe some partners, maybe they're looking to invest in a new opportunity and they want you to go and take part of that. You could also submit a letter from your employer stating why they need you to be part of that meeting, part of that business endeavor, and you could submit a request to travel on advanced parole under the employment reason. You could also do the same if you're now in school or you're going to participate in an education program, right? Maybe there is a study abroad program that you want to be a part of. Maybe there is a, you know, education conference or a language program that you want to be a part of. For those, you could submit a request for advanced parole under the education reason, submit information about the program, the syllabus, the school, and see if USCIS will approve you to travel on advanced parole under the education reason. The last and most common that we hear is humanitarian. So that's traveling usually to visit a family member, often to visit a family member that is sick or is elderly. For those sort of requests, individuals usually submit letters from physicians or hospitals or social workers showing why they are required to travel or need to travel to be with this family member, right? And this could include a letter from the physician. It could include information about your family relationship with that person. It could also include pictures, right, of that situation as to why you need to go. And that would fall under the humanitarian purpose. We've also heard of instances where people have asked to travel to get a medical procedure done that might be cheaper in a different country than here in the United States. It's definitely worth exploring. If you're interested in traveling on advanced parole, it could give several benefits to someone who's a DACA recipient. One of them is the ability to travel, right? Without advanced parole, DACA recipients are not eligible to travel without losing DACA. If you travel with advanced parole, you are free to travel for the time period requested and given and re-enter without having to lose your DACA status. It could also allow you to potentially become eligible for different benefits in the future, right? Once you have that paroled entry. If you are interested in travel, it's definitely important to go and speak to an immigration attorney or a DOJ accredited rep to get screened, right? Because you are leaving the country, there are certain risks associated with that. So you want to make sure that you get screened to make sure you do, in fact, have a reason to travel that fits under these 3 categories. And also that if you travel, the risks are minimal, right? That your immigration history or anything that has happened wouldn't create or increase the risk of you leaving the country. Okay. So that's the current status of DACA, right? It's open for individuals who are requesting to renew, right? Have DACA right now, need to renew, and those whose DACA expired less than a year ago. Also, DACA recipients are still eligible to apply and request for advanced parole, and those are still being granted. Definitely, if you're interested in travel, I encourage you to go and get a legal screening, speak to an attorney to see what documentation you would need, and also see how it would work for you to travel abroad to do that. For next step for DACA recipients, knowing the current status of DACA and what might come in the future, I think it's really important now to renew your DACA, right? Continue renewing your DACA. Even with the litigation as it is now, people are still eligible to continue renewing, and they should renew. Also, I think it's really important to get an immigration screening because the future of DACA is uncertain at this point, and also because DACA doesn't afford other protections outside of those 2 years of deferred action and 2 years of work authorization. It's really important to see if you would be eligible for something else outside of DACA, and to definitely stay informed, right? Because things will continue to change, as Krsna will go through in a bit. So it's very important to stay informed and make sure that you have the most up-to-date information, right? So renew your DACA. Eligible individuals should continue to renew. DACA, remember, if your permit expires within 6 months, you should renew as soon as possible. So make sure that you don't have any gaps in your work permit at the moment. Also, it's very important to get an immigration screening. So if you know of a trusted organization or you need a list of a trusted organization, we could provide one. It's important to make an appointment to speak with an attorney about any of the following, right? First, to see if you would be eligible for any form of immigration status that would allow you to obtain a green card, right? Or allow you to obtain a benefit that would put you on a pathway to become a US citizen. And this could be for you or your family, depending on the circumstances. It's very important that you speak to someone and see about the facts of your own case, your own immigration history, to see if you would be eligible for something. Also, it's important to understand your options as a DACA recipient, right? What benefits you have, what risks you might have, and also explore whether you could travel on advanced parole and how that might make you eligible for something in the future, right? Especially if you are, right now, seeing how you become eligible to become a lawful permanent resident, right? Or have a green card, that could be something that could help in the future. So definitely go and speak to someone about that. It also, helps answer any immigration related questions. We get a lot of news right now about immigration, right? A lot of things come up on TikTok or Instagram about, what has been announced, what's happening with immigration, who's eligible for what. Make sure that you, go speak to someone specifically, because things change depending on your own circumstances. So you can't expect that what's, right for someone else would be right for you, or what prevented someone else would also prevent you. So you need to have that conversation and also see if someone could help you with your case. There's different forms of immigration relief. Someone could be eligible depending on your facts, right? Most commonly, people obtain status in the United States through a family-based immigration. That means that they have a spouse or a parent who could petition for them, right? There's also benefits for, or certain immigration benefits for people who might have been victims of certain crimes in the United States, or possibly maybe they have a family member who, you know, they don't really know, but maybe they have gotten certain immigration benefit from them. So it's really important to go and speak to immigration attorney to see what you might be eligible for. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Krsna.
Great. Thank you so much, Veronica. And thank you all for holding on tight. I know it's been a long night, but this information is important for you all to know and to also let others know who couldn't join today. So this next section, I'll be talking about the DACA rule. Many of you have heard about this, so I'll go into details onto explaining what that is, and talk a little bit about current litigation. So what's happening with DACA in the courts and what we think could happen in the future. Next slide, please. So many of you have heard about the DACA rule, which went into effect on October 31st of this year. But what is that? What is a DACA rule? In order to understand what that is, we first have to go back to 2012. If many of you remember, that's when back then President Obama announced the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. So when he did that, when the Obama administration created DACA, it did so by basically writing a memorandum, which is a letter. It basically, in a letter, wrote down the requirements for DACA and why it thought that certain people who came as children should be protected from deportation and also get a work authorization. So fast forward to today, as I'll talk about in a little bit, one of the main arguments in a lot of the lawsuits trying to terminate DACA is that when Obama announced that program, it didn't go through the proper procedures. So it's basically arguing that when it created that letter, it didn't notify the public that it was going to do that. And it didn't give the public a chance to give comments and suggestions about the program before finalizing DACA. So what this rule does is basically that the Biden administration went back and said, you know what, we're going to try to protect DACA a little bit more. We're going to notify the public that we're going to create a DACA rule and give the public a chance to give comments. And so if you all remember in 2020, lots of organizations and the public provided comments and suggestions. And then finally, we got this rule. So what it does is that basically it replaces that original letter that Obama created back in 2012, that memorandum. And now what's in place is this DACA rule. And like I said, it basically just protects DACA a little bit more as it relates to the litigation that's going on. Unfortunately, one of the things that we tried to do is to advocate when they announced that they were going to create this rule. We advocated to see if they can open the program up to more people. You know, we know that now there's recently arrived immigrant youth who don't qualify for DACA. And so we try to advocate to expand the program. But unfortunately, as you'll see in the next slides, the DACA rule is basically the same as it relates to the requirements. So everything that Vero touched on is true for the DACA rule. So unfortunately, only folks that were eligible under the original program still are the ones that could qualify now. Next slide, please. That being said, so there were some differences. So when the Biden administration announced that it was going to create this rule, we saw some troubling things. So we gave a lot of comments so that they could change it so that now the final rule reflects a lot of the comments that the public gave. So one of the things that the Biden administration tried to do is to separate the work authorization from deferred action. So right now, when you apply for DACA, as many of you know, you have to apply for both a work permit and for deferred action. So you don't have the choice of applying for either of those. Say you wanted to just apply for deferred action without the work permit, you don't have the option to do that. The Biden administration tried to separate those out, but the final rule, it's basically how it's always been, which is that you have to apply for both. You don't have the option to apply for just one. Something else that's different from the proposed rule to the final rule, which is actually a good thing, is that right now, if you live in certain states and you have a criminal conviction, some states allow you to go back and either erase that conviction from your criminal record, or to lower it from a felony to a misdemeanor. These are what are called expunged convictions. So for DACA, under the original program, if you were able to go back and get your conviction expunged from your record, then that's fine. So for example, if many of you know, 2 or more misdemeanors disqualify you for DACA. If you went back and expunged your conviction so that it's no longer on your record, then for DACA, you could still be eligible. But the Biden administration tried to get rid of that. So they tried to, under the proposed rule, say that if you have an expunged conviction, it doesn't matter, as what they're going to look at is your original conviction. And if you have that on your record, even though you expunged that conviction, then you would be disqualified. But fortunately, again, a lot of the public, including us, we provided comments and told the Biden administration that that wasn't a good thing. And so now we have, under the final rule, again, the ability to get your conviction expunged if you live in a state that allows you to do that, so that you can remain eligible for DACA. Another good thing is that, and actually a new thing, is that now if the government wants to terminate your DACA, they first have to give you notice of intent to terminate. So they first have to give you a letter saying that they want to terminate your DACA, and then that allows you to then look at their arguments for trying to terminate your DACA and try to argue that you still remain eligible. So it's an extra protection that's there in place now. That wasn't the case for all DACA recipients before. And now anytime that if the government wants to terminate anyone's DACA, they have to send this notice to you, which is a good thing. And then lastly, under the rule, it continues to protect your information that you submit when you're applying for your DACA application or associated applications as well. It protects the information about you and your family. And I put generally, it protects that. We know that obviously ICE might have access to it in other ways, but from what we know, they're sticking to their, what they've been saying is that they will only use this information if they think that the person is a threat to national security. We're talking about terrorism, espionage kind of things, or if they see that there's fraud involved in the application for DACA, then they might use that information. But otherwise, from what we've seen, that information is protected from being used for deportation purposes. So that's a good thing. Next slide, please. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the litigation. So the lawsuits. So many are still confused. I sometimes still get confused because there's been so many lawsuits. But one of the main questions that we often see is, wait a minute, back in December of 2020, the US Supreme Court took on the case about DACA. Why are we still in the courts if I thought the Supreme Court took on the case and decided this? Well, we have to understand that that case was different. Back then, that case was all about Trump. It was about Trump trying to end DACA. And basically, when, as many of you remembered, Trump tried to end DACA on his first, I think it was his first week of being president. And right after that happened, many advocates came and sued and said that, hey, wait a minute, the way you terminated the program is actually unlawful, so we're going to sue you. And so that's what that case was about. The Supreme Court agreed. They said the way that Trump terminated the program was unlawful. And so they had to reopen the program back up because they didn't terminate it the right way, basically. Now, fast forward, unfortunately, the state of Texas filed a different lawsuit. And in this lawsuit, they're basically challenging the DACA program directly. And they're saying, we don't care about how Trump terminated the program. We are arguing that DACA itself is unlawful. We're arguing that the president can't create the program. They don't have the authority to create a program like this. Only Congress has the ability to do that. And so, like I mentioned, you know, one of their arguments is, once again, that back in 2012, that Obama, when it created the program, it didn't go through the right procedure to do it. They didn't announce it to the public. They didn't allow the public to give comments. And so that's why, again, once again, the Biden administration tried to create the rule to protect it from this current litigation that's being led by the state of Texas. Next slide, please. So what's happening with that lawsuit? So July of 16th of 2021, basically the US District Court of the Southern District of Texas, the judge there said that, yes, I agree, the DACA policy is actually unlawful. So what it did is that it vacated the original letter from Obama, which created the DACA program. But it said, you know what, in the meantime, while we continue to argue this, I recognize that many people have come to rely on the program. So I'm going to allow for folks who have DACA to continue renewing while we continue litigating these issues. So basically, remanded the case back to the government to try to fix these issues. And that's why after this ruling, the Biden administration came up with the rule, because that's one of their ways of arguing that although they didn't go again through the process back in 2012, now they're going through the process this time to hopefully resolve some of those issues. Next slide, please. So where are we now? So October of this year, basically after that original district court ruling, the Biden administration appealed to the Fifth Circuit, which is the court that's above that district court. And unfortunately, the Fifth Circuit agreed with the lower court and said that that original Napolitano memo, that memorandum and from 2012 from Obama, that is unlawful. But it recognized that because now there's this new rule, and that new rule wasn't part of what they were litigating up until then. It recognized that because there's this new rule, and they have to now see whether this rule is lawful or not. So it basically gave the case back down to the US District Court. And so as of now, that's where we are. The US District Court is now trying to assess whether this rule is lawful or not. But unfortunately, on October 14th, it did say that while they're litigating, once again, that people who haven't had DACA before can apply for the very first time. So for now, while they continue to litigate that, only people who have DACA can renew, basically. Next slide, please. So what's next? So basically, right now, we're just waiting for this district court to let us know if they think this rule is lawful or not. We don't know when that decision could come. It could come any day now. They just finished arguing, and so right now we're just waiting for that decision. But unfortunately, that's probably not going to be the end of it. I mean, our hopes is that the judge agrees with advocates, and they say that DACA is lawful, that this rule is lawful. But if they don't, then once again, advocates can appeal back to the Fifth Circuit, or they can appeal directly to the Supreme Court. Most likely they'll appeal to the Fifth Circuit and then to the Supreme Court if they lose again. So basically we're back to kind of square one, just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with this rule and whether they think it's lawful or not. And it's just a waiting game, basically. Next slide, please. So once again, kind of the summary is that the new rule is now in place. There's some good things about it, and there's also so a little bit more information about certain things. So, for example, if you go to the USCIS website, they have an updated frequently asked questions section that goes into a little bit more detail about certain things about the DACA program. So check that out. But the rule is basically what you're looking at now. And like we've been mentioning, only people who have DACA can continue renewing and should continue renewing. Previously issued DACAs continue to be valid until their expiration date. And then once again, like Vero mentioned, you can also seek advance parole. And this is something that we want to emphasize. If you haven't applied for advance parole, we know many people who have done it, especially if you came into the country unlawfully originally. Being able to travel on advance parole and coming back will allow you to have a lawful entry, which is a good thing down the line if you're applying for a green card for certain cases. So, and then of course you get to travel. So if you're eligible for it, talk to an attorney or an advocate to see if there's any red flags in your case. And if there's not, please travel. We know many success stories. Next slide, please. Okay, so now a little bit about Beyond DACA. I actually don't remember if I'm in this section too. Am I?
Yes, you are, but
Okay.
I just have one slide.
Okay, sounds good. So I will continue. Oh wait, no, that's you first.
Yeah. Yeah. So just really quickly, right? Like Krsna mentioned, we're waiting to hear this decision from the court. And while we're hoping that it will be a positive decision and DACA will be able to continue, there is the possibility that it will be a negative decision, right? And DACA will not be able to continue. So what happens, in a world beyond DACA? And also, as Krsna mentioned, the DACA rule kept the same requirements as the DACA memo, right, to the original DACA. So there are a lot of individuals who wouldn't qualify for DACA, even if it's reopened for everybody, right? So what are, in this section, we want to speak about some of the things of what will happen, beyond DACA and what is available to people who might not have DACA right now. So just quickly wanted to start and speak a little bit about workers' rights. There are a lot of questions on what will happen to your employment if you lose your DACA work permit or if you don't have your DACA work permit. Just wanted to speak a little here about some of the rights that individuals have. Some of the questions that we've heard are, whether you're required to tell your employer that your DACA has expired, right? Maybe if you're waiting to get it renewed and you haven't gotten it renewed, or whether your employer could ask you to re-verify that you have a work permit. What are the parameters of that? Just generally, right, for someone who has DACA and whose DACA work permit has expired, as of now, you're technically not required to tell your work permit, tell your employer that your work permit has expired. They could definitely ask you to verify when it expires, to ask you for the new work permit that shows you're still eligible to work. They could do that, but they can't ask you to verify it just at any random point, right? And if they do, it should be towards everybody, not just DACA recipients, right, to verify your eligibility. But generally, they're only allowed to ask you to re-verify when they know that it's going to expire or has expired, but you don't have to start that conversation with them. And then also, if you no longer have DACA and you're working, there are rights that everybody has regardless of status as workers, right, to get paid and to get good working conditions. There's a lot of information on this on the website Legal Aid at Work that I would encourage you all to see around what rights someone has, whether they have status or they don't have status, just to be informed of that.
All right, so in this next section, I'm actually going to go through it a little bit fast because we actually have the pleasure of having one of the panelists, my friend Ileana Perez, who actually leads and is the expert on earning a living without DACA. So we actually know that many people don't have DACA now. They don't qualify, and she's been leading a program that's part of Immigrants Rising to really let folks know that there are ways that people can earn a living inside of the United States, even if they don't have any lawful status. That includes DACA, and that includes anything. If they're undocumented, there are ways for them to earn a living. Next slide. So first, I want to mention a law. So many of you have heard of quote unquote amnesty, which was a law that was passed in 1986 called IRCA. Yes, it gave the ability for many people to get a green card. Many people who were undocumented here at that time were able to legalize. One of the things that many people don't know is that that same law, for the first time, made it a crime for certain entities to hire undocumented workers. So that's why, because of this law, it's unlawful for employers to have employees who are undocumented, right? So you have to have lawful status, a work permit, in order to lawfully work because of this law. Next slide. That being said, there are many advocacy efforts that are going on. One of the cool recent advocacy efforts here in California is basically led by a group of UCLA law professors who are basically arguing that though that law exists, it actually doesn't apply to everyone. So they're arguing that it only applies to persons and certain entities and the federal government, but it does not apply to states. So what does that mean? That means that if a state wants to hire an undocumented person, they would be able to do that. Of course, that's their argument. They're pushing for this. They're actually pushing here in California, the University of California, the UC system, to hire undocumented students and other staff positions. So we'll see what happens with that. But if they're successful with this argument, this could be huge, because while we wait for federal legislation, which we'll talk about in a little bit, in the meantime, states would have the ability to hire undocumented workers, and that would be huge for people who don't have lawful status or the ability to work lawfully. Next slide. And so I'm sure Ileana will talk about this, but once again, even without all that, even without that advocacy, there are still ways that folks can earn a living through independent contracting. So when you're an independent contractor, you're not an employee, you're just contracting to provide services. You can do consulting, you can create your own business, right? If you're earning a living by creating your own business, you're not an employee of anyone, you're your own employer. So that's another way of earning your business. So Ileana will, I'm sure we'll talk about this in more detail. Next slide, please. And yes, just a plug for her and her organization. They are the experts in this area, Immigrants Rising. If you haven't heard of them, check out their website. They have lots of great tools and resources, and they talk about the idea of undocu-hustle. So, you know, the fact that as undocumented folks, we're pretty resilient, and we have found ways to survive and go beyond surviving. So go to that website to learn more about that. And with that, I believe I am done with my section.
I can take over for some of the advocacy. This is Jehan. Thank you. Yeah, so some of the advocacy that comes up, like Krsna was saying, is actually getting Congress to pass a law that would legalize folks. So legalize folks that have DACA and others. One that was looking pretty promising was the Dream and Promise Act. It was something that was introduced by Zoe Lofgren, a congressperson in Northern California. And that was going to be a bill that would help folks that are called dreamers, people that qualify for DACA, actually legalize in a more permanent way. And that was also going to help folks that had deferred action. And we can go to the next slide. And this year, at the end of this year, we were hoping that the Democrats would lead a push to also legalize folks that have DACA. There was something that was being put together called the Cinema-Tillis framework. I have a sad face next to it because it was really trading the dreamers for other folks. So it was an idea to put folks that have DACA on a harsh path to citizenship. I say harsh path because it would have been a 10-year wait for citizenship, and it would have included prohibitions such as if you have a US citizen spouse or a legal permanent resident spouse, they wouldn't be allowed to petition for you. You still have to wait the 10 years. And it was going to be in exchange for a lot of border security measures. And also it included a lot of bad changes to the asylum law. Last week, Nancy Pelosi said that this framework wouldn't be moving forward. You might hear in the news, it just came out today, there's another Kristen Sinema-led immigration push. And this one seems to be doing more with border enforcement. It seems like they've dropped any changes that would have been to DACA. However, we all still would advocate for calling your Congress people and asking for a standalone Dream and Promise Act. So something similar to what was introduced in 2021. And so we call it standalone legislation because it's saying, like, you know, we're not going to trade people who have DACA for their parents and say, like, okay, we're going to put harsher border enforcement or interior enforcement on everybody else just for folks that have DACA. So yeah, we would definitely, and someone already put it in the chat, but we would definitely encourage you to push for a standalone legislation to protect DACA. And I think that's the end of our LRC's presentation. So thank you all for having us, and I'll pass it back.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to our presenters for preparing such a wonderful presentation for us and for our audience to really just guide us through of what is actually happening with DACA. And just as a reminder to everyone, for any questions that you guys may have, we have a Q&A box. So if you guys have any pending or pressing questions, feel free to drop them in then and we will get to them as soon as we can. Once we are finished listening to the rest of our panelists. So first and foremost, I would like to introduce our next panelist. Her name is Dr. Karina Chavarria. She is an assistant professor of sociology at Channel Islands in Camarillo. Dr. Chavarria's research takes on an interdisciplinary approach, incorporating ideas from sociology, education, and ethnic studies to examine the relationship between structured educational inequities and youth agency in enacting transformative social change. So Dr. Karina Chavarria, I will leave the floor open to you whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Guadalupe. I appreciate that. Good evening, night, everyone. If those of you who are here from the East Coast, definitely night. I'm currently joining you all from Texas, Dallas to be specific. So for us, it's about 10:30 p.m. In the sake of time, and to just kind of emphasize some important points from our prior panelist, I want to kind of focus a little bit on DACA, but in terms of its relation to pursuing post-secondary education among undocumented youth and young adults. And so DACA, as we were greatly provided detailed information, is particularly about immigration status, right? And providing a what sometimes some of us academics call a limbo state for a select number of undocumented youth and young adults. And what I mean by this is that DACA it's a Band-Aid, right? It's not, it doesn't address the issues, the real roots of the challenges that emerge from undocumented status. It's only kind of a in-between kind of solution. And for undocumented students, I particularly work with undocumented high school and college students. DACA provides, right, some degree of respite in terms of providing opportunities to earn income that can enable young people to cover expenses of college. But DACA is not necessarily about pursuing a college education. And I want to emphasize three legislations in essence, right? Two of which are particularly about college. So in California and in a couple of other states, we have what we call AB 540, Assembly Bill 540, that was enacted back in 2001 when I myself was still undocumented. That allowed us who were undocumented back then to access in-state tuition rates for college. And so that makes it so that we are not paying international fees. And we can petition our colleges and universities to treat us as California residents, which many of us, if not most of us, are, because we've been living in the state for, if not all of our lives, very close to all of our lives. And so we use that document at the community college, at the California State University systems, the UC systems, and the private universities to request that the universities consider us as residents so that we pay in-state tuition. And in 2011 and 2012, we have in California the enactment of the California Dream Act, which is very different from what was just being presented, which is the federal, what is known as the Federal Dream Act, a proposed legislation. But in California, we have the California Dream Act, which allows undocumented students to access the Cal Grants in California, which is a financial aid that California provides students to help cover some of the college expenses. And this includes Cal Grant A, Cal Grant B, and Cal Grant C. And Cal Grant C is specifically reserved for community college students. Though I always advise students that when they are in community college, not to use any of their Cal Grants, because there is a limit to how many years they will fund your college tuition, and that's capped at 5 years. So if it takes you 3 years to complete a college education at the community college, then you only have 2 years left of funding. And oftentimes, for many of us who are working class, it takes us longer than 2 years to complete our BAs. So I often advise students not to touch their Cal Grants, to go to the financial aid office and tell them not to disperse any of their Cal Grant aid until they have transferred onto a 4-year university. So the California DREAM Act and the AB 540 affidavit are strategically and specifically about college. That is the funding. Those are the pieces of legislation that allow undocumented students in California to pursue a college education. And thankfully, the state of California has extended in the past couple of years who is eligible for AB 540 status. It used to be quite still constraining, but now they've widened it significantly, so that most undocumented students who want to pursue a college education and want to or need to start at the community college, they can definitely do so by applying and submitting their AB 540 affidavit to pay in-state tuition. And the California DREAM Act, as many of you may or may not know, has GPA requirements for Cal Grant A and Cal Grant B. So financial aid is available irrespective of what happens to DACA. Those two pieces of legislation, AB 540 and the California DREAM Act, are not going to be affected as far as we know right now. Those are the purview of the state of California, and only the state of California determines what will happen to those pieces of legislation. So I just want to assure, right, those of you who are watching us now and those who will be watching this recording, that there is financial aid, there is financial support for undocumented students to pursue a college education, to continue their education up to a graduate level if they so would like, without fear of losing any of that if it is the case that DACA is completely rescinded, right? And so to add, right, we don't know what will happen to DACA, but in any case, we are still urging our community members, right, to continue the struggle for comprehensive immigration reform, one that is not zero-sum, one that doesn't try to buy a segment of our undocumented student or undocumented community members' stability at the expense of another segment of our community. We want immigration reform that takes account of everyone and allows all of us to live a humane, right, and just existence on this country, and hopefully in other countries as well. So in the sake of time, I just wanted to provide that brief differentiation between these what are often called the three major pieces of legislation here in California, right? So that you all can have that information and share with your networks and the community. I will say that California, many of us would call ourselves lucky to live here because of the kind of pro-immigrant legislation that exists here. It wasn't the case, especially when I was a teenager back in the 80s and 90s. California was actually much more like Arizona very nativist, very racist, very xenophobic, but thankfully with the community support and with a lot of hard work from activists and organizations and lawyers, we've turned it around, which tells us that that is possible, right? It is possible to bring forth a more just immigration policy at the state and federal level. And so I will turn it back to you, Guadalupe. If there are any questions with regards to the information that I did present, I am here to provide additional information. Of course, the last piece that I will say is that because of the nature of immigration policies and legislation across the country, we see quite a variation in legislation among states. Some states outright deny undocumented students from enrolling in public institutions. Some states provide half access to pursuing a post-secondary education with some degree of financial support or no financial support. And so it's a complicated kind of story that varies state by state. But here in California, we have quite a bit of support. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Karina Chavarria. That was very insightful and informative for all of us. For anybody that didn't have that information before, we hope that it was fruitful to know and we can do something with that as well. So I would like to give this to our next panelist. Her name is Violeta Murillo. She immigrated to the United States with her family from Ensenada, Baja California, Mexico, when she was only 6 years old. And she is currently a senior at Channel Islands. She's double majoring in Chicano studies and Spanish with a minor in political science. And she hopes to pursue graduate school and become an educator in higher education. So I will now leave it open to her to give us some of her shared testimonies. Thank you.
Thank you, Guadalupe. And so, hello, everyone. My name is Violeta, and as previously stated, I am currently attending CSU Channel Islands. And a key piece that I want to mention is that I am not documented. I do not have DACA. I was not, unfortunately, not able to qualify for it. But I want to talk a little bit about the work that I do with my campus Multicultural Dream Center. This center specifically focuses on the needs and just things that might benefit, offer a lot of resources to undocumented students, which is under our underrepresented student initiatives. And under these services and resources, we offer free immigration legal services, which are provided by the Central American Resource Center, also known as Krsna. And I am currently serving as the Krsna Legal Advocacy Fellow for CSU Channel Islands. And these services are for students, their immediate family members, faculty, staff, and also alumni for up to 2 years after graduation. They do help with a variety of services, and these services aren't just specifically for students and their immediate family members attending CSU Channel Islands. Krsna actually has a college legal services team based in LA, which serves many community colleges, but also serves 8 CSU campuses, which include Panoma, San Bernardino, Los Angeles, Northridge, Channel Islands being one of them, Long Beach, and CSU Fullerton. And so these are some of the services that are available to students, their family, if they are in need. Another key piece that I want to mention is that because on the topic of DACA, there's still currently filing assistance that is offered through Krsna. And even if you don't have anybody that attends these institutions, you are still able to make appointments through Krsna's general page, and they are still able to help you with any services that you may need. And like I mentioned before, we do have filing assistance still available for DACA renewals, and essentially you would book an appointment with Krsna and they will be able to apply for the funding for you, and you would get the exact amount needed to pay for your DACA filing fee. And so that is something that I wanted to mention that is available to not only students in the CSU campuses, but to their families as well. And that is some of the things that I wanted to share specifically because not a lot of individuals know that these are resources available to them upon entering these community colleges as well as CSU universities. And it's something that I wanted to share light on because it's something that you can greatly benefit from. And also know that you're not alone in this process, and that there is resources meant to help you. And also, if you have any general questions, Krsna is just one of the many organizations that can help provide these answers for immigration related questions or anything that is needed. And so that is a little bit of like my experience and a little bit of the work that I do to kind of help educate myself and keep up to date with these changing immigration policies and laws, but also as a way for me to give back to my community and be able to help support other students both with and without DACA. And I'll turn it back to you, Guadalupe. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you so much. I'm so glad that your school has those services provided, especially because we know how expensive those can be if they were to reach out and seek a private attorney. So I'm really grateful that you guys have that at your guys' university, and sounds like at many of the universities here in California. So hopefully we can shed more light on that to let students know that they have access to this. And if hopefully they will reach out and to know to not have like that fear of talking to somebody, because it's very important to have more information than to have those questions. So thank you so much. So now I will go ahead and present our next presenter for our panelist. Her name is Danae Randin. She serves as an entrepreneurship support specialist with Immigrants Rising, a national organization providing resources and support so that undocumented people are able to get an education, pursue careers, and build a bright future for themselves and their community. Danae is an undocumented Black DACA recipient and national immigrant rights activist who advocates for the representation of her communities within the mainstream immigrant narrative. So if we can just give a nice warm welcome, and the floor is yours, Danae.
Thank you so much, Guadalupe. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and for having patience to bear with us tonight. I think the information that has been shared has been so incredible and powerful for us to be able to see it from the viewpoints that we have. Okay, it looks like I can't screen share. Would you be able to give me permission to do that? I think first things first, the most important thing that I heard from both Krsna as well as Veronica is the importance of renewing, right? It's not over until it's over. And so just go ahead and renew. One of the first resources that I wanted to go ahead and share with you is that the state of California has the DACA and Naturalization Application Filing Fees Project. So once again, that's the DACA and Naturalization Application Filing Fees Project. It's also referred as DNAF. Okay, perfect. So let me go ahead and share this with you so you all could see exactly what I'm talking about. And so where that is right here, and it allows people to get their application fees either partially or completely covered, and it's provided by the state of California. For me, not only am I a DACA recipient, I'm also an entrepreneur, and I've actually been an entrepreneur even while having DACA. And the reason why is because I think I always knew that the signs were there, that DACA was always under attack each and every year. And I think one of the things that we have to remember as undocumented people is that undocumented people have been thriving without DACA for decades now, right? And so while I would love for DACA to remain in place, the reality is that it's always under attack, and there's undocumented people who aren't just surviving, but are thriving and are actually employing American citizens. And so what do I mean by that? So I just want to be able to equip you all with the tools that you need to succeed. And I'm sure my boss, Ileana, will go more in depth. But some of the things that I really want you to know is that even if you lose your work permit, there's a way that you can continue to work as an independent contractor, as a consultant. So for instance, a DACA beneficiary has their own assigned Social Security numbers. One of the great things about that is even if DACA goes away, the Social Security number that was given to you when you first applied for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals is actually the same Social Security number that you could use for the rest of your life. With with or without documented status. So you could utilize that same social security number to go ahead and pursue independent contracting work or to even start your own business. Now, the only stipulation to that is if DACA goes away tomorrow, you're unable to be hired by the company that you previously worked with. And why is that? The reason why is because they would have already figured out that your work permit has expired. So you might not want to do that. It's not safe. But there's plenty of ways that you could work for yourself. For myself in particular, I consult with nonprofit organizations, immigration and otherwise, and I do communications consulting. In addition to that, I provide independent contracting opportunities for colleges and universities across the nation to help them better understand how to assist their undocumented student population. You could do the same thing, right? Independent contractors are not employees. So you're not covered by federal employment statutes, which is good and bad, right? Independent contractors can participate in both the gig economy or just offer professional services in a specific area. And I just put that in for fun so that you could know that you could also be where the money resides even without documented status, right? And so you do not need a social security number. So if you are completely undocumented, meaning you don't have DACA, you don't have TPS or TPS, then a simple individual taxpayer identification number, also known as an ITIN number, will suffice. So what does that mean? If you're doing this work as a consultant, you will receive all of the profits from that gig and no taxes will be withheld from your money. And the wonderful thing about being able to get an individual taxpayer identification number is that immigrants, regardless of your status, whether or not you're documented, completely undocumented, a TPS recipient, you're able to work in the United States of America and create an LLC. And I know those conversations have started for a little while now, where people are discussing alternatives to being documented. And that's one of the ways that you could do that. And the reason why an LLC is great is because once you show that you have an LLC, they normally won't work to obtain any other information about the individuals who are part of the LLC. So if you've already established an LLC, they won't ask you for any other personal information, which would need to verify your status. That's a great thing. The way that you could go about creating an LLC in the state of California right now is actually wonderful. Governor Newsom has worked very hard to make sure that the creation of LLCs are as accessible as possible. And I would argue that this is one of the best times for you to create a limited liability corporation in the state of California. And the reason why it's the best time is because the state has waived all of the fees for you to be able to create an LLC. Before, you would pay about $100 to create an LLC. Now it's completely free. Not just that, normally when you create an LLC in the state of California, you would be expected to pay about $800 per year. So once you've created an LLC, you're automatically expected to pay a minimum of $800 just by virtue of having that LLC. What the state of California has done is made it possible where in your first year of having an LLC, you will not be expected to pay that $800 at all. So I would urge you that if you want to consider an LLC, given the fact that we do not know which direction DACA is going, to go ahead and do that. So you, one, don't have to pay the filing fee, but so you, two, don't have to worry about the tax implications of an LLC. And the reason why this is great is because we have a waiver until June 30th, 2023, which is the end of the California fiscal year, right? And I think it just allows you the opportunity to have a little bit more freedom. It allows you to be able to do the work that you're passionate about, but most importantly, it allows you to do that without having to worry about whether or not you have quote unquote lawful status in the United States of America. And whether or not DACA goes away, I always would argue that it's the best possible thing for you to be able to learn how to work for self. Unfortunately, we live in a nation that has often deprived us, even with DACA, of certain job opportunities simply because of our countries of origin, right? And so if you know how to be able to thrive with or without DACA, then even if a decision comes down tomorrow, we won't be left in limbo. And that's one of the reasons that I always advocate for entrepreneurship. So look up the creation of an LLC. If you are completely undocumented, look up being able to get an individual taxpayer identification number so that you do not have to worry about a social security number, right? And there's so many resources that I'm sure my boss, Ileana, will go into right after this that allows you to be able to build upon that topic that much more. But the moral of the story is that you could work and you could thrive without having to worry about whether or not your status is going to be used as a pawn in a larger political game. So thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much. I think that's something that a lot of us learned from, and just knowing that I didn't know the accessibility, and I don't know if many others did, and just knowing that even if you don't have documents, or if you are undocumented or don't have DACA, many people always worry. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Like, hey, like my work permit is going to expire. What do I do? Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind. So just knowing that this is something that's very available to them, I think is amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight. And let me just go ahead and give this next to our very last presenter today. It is Dr. Ileana Perez. She is a director of research and entrepreneurship at Immigrants Rising and works closely with Ileana. So Ileana was born in Hidalgo, Mexico, and immigrated alongside her mother, father, and younger brother to the US at age 8. Ileana grew up in California's Central Valley and navigated the educational system as an undocumented student for 18 years until she became a DACA recipient in 2013. Ileana holds a BA in mathematics from Fresno State, a MA in economics from Claremont Graduate University, and recently completed a PhD in education policy, evaluation, and reform, also from Claremont Graduate University. So thank you, Ileana. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Guadalupe. It's a pleasure to be here. And I am definitely here to reiterate a lot of what my esteemed colleagues have shared with respect to entrepreneurship. I'm Ileana Perez. I serve as the Director of Research and Entrepreneurship at Immigrants Rising. For those of you not familiar with Immigrants Rising, we are a nonprofit organization that has been around for over 15 years. It started off as offering scholarships to undocumented students, but quickly evolved into offering a wide variety of services and programming, such as higher education resources, legal services through our free legal intake form, mental health services, and entrepreneurship, which is mostly what I will be talking about over the next few minutes. But I definitely encourage everybody to check out our website and take a look at some of the amazing resources and programming that we have available. So a little bit about entrepreneurship in terms of how we started to think about it, and I'm so glad that my colleague Danae, Krsna have already talked quite a bit about why it's so important for the undocumented community to learn these options. So we started thinking about this over 10 years ago, mostly as a result of undocumented students such as myself, having graduated from college as undocumented students and trying to think about what life would look like next, particularly how to make money. This is when we began to do research and began to create resources to inform the undocumented community about these opportunities. And as my colleague Danae mentioned, a lot of our work is premised on the idea that the immigrant community has been resilient and innovative forever. We all can probably think of our friends, family, neighbors who sell food, do babysitting, auto repair, work in construction, film, photography, etc. This is something that we have had to do as a result of the barriers to employment that exist due to undocumented individuals individuals not being able to get work authorization or a social security number. So as my colleagues have mentioned, entrepreneurship can serve as an opportunity for anyone, regardless of immigration status, to be able to make a living as independent contractors or business owners. And of course, this is particularly important given the possibility of DACA going away and individuals having to think about entrepreneurship as a potential plan B or even a plan A, such as the case of individuals like Danae who are already doing both, maybe doing employment and also working as independent contractors or business owners. This is, of course, extremely important for the majority of the undocumented population that is currently not eligible for DACA, particularly undocumented students enrolled in colleges and universities that need to be thinking about entrepreneurship as a plan A. So what we have to offer at Immigrants Rising is a vast library of information and resources that are easy to access. We have FAQs about the item that Danae talked about. We have step-by-step guides as to what it takes to start a business. We have lots of information around how to build credit through an I-10, how to access additional capital to start or grow a business. In addition to that, most recently, we launched our website called Spark, which is an online learning platform where anyone can access for free to actually learn about the basic elements of entrepreneurship. Most importantly, we also have small business grants through our SEED program. So the SEED initiative is a statewide grant that has been granted to several nonprofit organizations across the state of California to be able to provide small business grants to immigrant entrepreneurs across the state. So Immigrants Rising, as well as several other organizations, are giving grants of $5,000 or $10,000 to immigrant entrepreneurs, regardless of their immigration status. We just wrapped up the first sort of what we're calling Seed 1.0, where we gave away over 715 grants. And we are getting ready to gear up the program again. And again, this is specifically for residents of California, regardless of immigration status. We plan to reopen this program back up in March. So definitely encourage anyone to pass this information along and visit our website to get updates. The last offering that we have at Immigrants Rising with respect to entrepreneurship is an ecosystem that consists of other entrepreneurs. We're getting ready to also release our entrepreneur directory so the community can do business with immigrant entrepreneurs. We have a large network of technical assistance providers and other nonprofit organizations that support with business development. So entrepreneurship can certainly feel scary, certainly feel like you're alone, but you are not. We have amazing support systems. We have amazing networks that we would be delighted to connect you with. So again, to learn more, you can check us out at immigrantsrising.org/makingmoney. And also you can check out our entrepreneurship learning platform at spark.immigrantsrising.org. And of course, happy to stick around and answer any questions. Thank you. I'll pass it back over to Guadalupe.
All right, thank you so much, Ileana, for sharing that with us. And thank you for everyone for being here with us. We want to thank you guys for having registered and attending this event. I want to thank all the presenters here today for preparing this for us and for giving their time to share this valuable information with all of us. And so just to reiterate for everyone, we are here to take action, to mobilize, and we want our voices to be heard because we need to make a difference. It is very necessary to do so. So I don't believe we have any Q&As, and just because we ran so late with this, I think we will just be wrapping up. And just to let everybody know, everybody that is here that registered, and for everyone that wasn't able to attend, we will be providing a follow-up email with links to resources of everything that we've discussed today, with anything that might be insightful and valuable for anybody else that is here or that you guys can share that with. So we will be sending that as well, and we will have our webinar that's been recorded in English and Spanish provided to everybody. So in case anybody missed it, or if anybody wants to rewatch it, you guys can tune in again. So I believe that is it, and I will close out with that, and we will be in touch with you guys shortly after with those follow-up emails. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night.